See me and Leslie? We're together?
Yeah, we're good.
Just get here.
Get a little bit.
Okay, good morning everybody. Yashikar, thank you for coming. I'd like to discuss today the sugya of Tisha B'Av. I called it Tisha B'Av Then and Now. We're going to discuss first the applicability of Tisha B'Av in the times of the second Beis HaMikdash, meaning whether or not and how they celebrated, so to speak, or they commemorated Tisha B'Av during the time of the second Beis HaMikdash. And hopefully, as we see as we go along, it's not just going to be a history shayla of what they did. There's going to be an nafkamina. There's going to be a difference for what they did for how we're going to commemorate Tisha B'Av today, and then particularly. This is not working. Start again. Okay, we're done. Okay, anybody have a way to record it for me?
It's not working?
You have an audio recorder on your phone?
No.
Okay.
Unable to start recording.
All right. Okay. All right. We'll do just the video. Fine. The audio doesn't work. Okay. Fine.
Record it?
So.
You want to record it?
Whatever. If you got one that works. Okay. All right.
Hold on.
It's okay. We got to keep moving. These people, they're live. Okay, so we're going to discuss how they commemorated Tisha B'Av in the days of the second Beis HaMikdash, and the applicability of how that affects Tisha B'Av today, and particularly this year, where Tisha B'Av is slated to fall out on Shabbos, and it's commemorated on. I don't know how to start this. Here we go, and it's commemorated on Sunday. So here we go. Let's start with the Gemara in Masechtas Rosh Hashanah. Here you got a. Masechta Rosh Hashanah, Daf Yud Ches, the Mishnah, source number 1. The Mishnah tells us as follows: Al Shisha Chadashim Ashluchin Yotzin. 6 months a year. We're talking about here in the times where the Beis HaMikdash was standing for sure. And the way they figured out when Rosh Chodesh was, the two witnesses would show up to Bezdin, right? They say they saw the new moon. We all know that basic story. And then Bezdin would declare Rosh Chodesh if they didn't pass the test that they were able to say there was a new moon. Then the question was how they got the word, how they spread the word to the outlying areas that it was Rosh Chodesh. So for 6 months, this is obviously before they invented social media and quicker ways to get messages across. So 6 months a year, they would send out shluchim to tell everybody that it was Rosh Chodesh. When were those 6 particular months? So here we go. Al Nisan Pnei Pesach, they sent down Rosh Chodesh Nisan to make sure everyone knew when Pesach was going to be. That's number 1. Al Av Mipnei Tainus. Number 2, they sent out Rosh Chodesh Av to everyone should know when Tisha B'Av was going to be. Al Elul Mipnei Rosh Hashanah. And El they sent out for when Rosh Hashanah was going to be, because usually they assume that El was Chaser, so they knew after 29 days it would be Rosh Hashanah. But they sent out again on Tishrei just to confirm people should know when Yom Kippur is and when Sukkot is. To put the rest of the holidays in place. Al Kislev Mnei Chanukah, they sent out messengers on Kislev because of Chanukah. Al Adar Bnei HaPurim. So those are the 6 months. Nisan, Av, Elul, Tishrei, Kislev, Adar. Those are the months that for sure the Shluchim went out. Concludes the Mishnah. Ukushaya Beis HaMikdash Kaim, when the Beis HaMikdash was still existent. Yotzin Afal Iyar. They also sent out the Shluchim for the month of Iyar, Pesach Katan, because what we call Pesach Sheni. So those people who missed their first opportunity would be able to bring a carbon Pesach on Pesach Sheni. So here we go. So the first part of the Mishnah, I said it sounds like it was talking about when the Beis HaMikdash was standing, because that's really when the Sanhedrin went in its full force. That's not 100% accurate, because you see at the ending of the Mishnah concludes when the Beis HaMikdash was still existent, then they went out also on Iyar. That seems to imply that the first part of the Mishnah was not talking about when the Beis HaMikdash was standing. Sounds like it was the first period after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash, when they still had a Sanhedrin, was still existent for a short period after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. It sounds like that's when the first part of the Mishnah is discussing, and the second part, the last line of the Mishnah, is talking about when the Beis HaMikdash was still existent. So just to recap, there are 6 months. The Mishnah says that the Shluchim went out. When the Beis HaMikdash was still standing, they went out also, this is an important word, they went out also in Iyar. It sounds like when the Beis HaMikdash was standing, they went out 7 months a year, and when the Beis HaMikdash was not standing, they went out 6 months a year. That's the way our Mishnah reads, and that would also seem to imply that they went out during Av, even at the time of the second Beis HaMikdash. When the Beis HaMikdash was still standing, it went out during Av, because the Mishnah said Bnei HaTainus. Meaning the Mishnah didn't say you go out either during Av or Iyar. Iyar would be for Pesach Sheni when the Beis HaMikdash is standing, and Av would be when the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed. No, it says it went out on Av, and it went out on Iyar when the Beis HaMikdash was still standing. Let's hold that point for now as we go along. The Gemara asks, V'lifku nami at Tammuz v'Teves. Why didn't the shluchim go out also in the beginning of Tammuz and the beginning of Teves? Because we have fast days in those months as well, 17th day of Tammuz and the 10th day of Teves. How do we know we have these fast days? The Gemara says, Amar Rav Chana bar Bizna, Amar Rav Shimon Chasida. The Gemara tells us, Ma'idich Siv. What does it mean? The pasuk in Zechariah, Koyamar Hashem Tzavaka, so says Hashem, Soim Haravi, the month of the fast of the 4th month, which is Tammuz. V'Tzayim HaChamishi, the fast of the 5th month, which is Av, the Tzayim HaShvi, the fast of the 7th month, which is Tzayim Gedalia, the Tzayim HaSiri, and the fast of the 10th month, which is Teves, Yeh Lebeis Yehuda L'Sasa and Simcha. So the pasuk says the fast days of these 4 months should be for the house of Yehuda, for the Jewish people, for happiness and for joyfulness. So Gemara asks, that seemingly is a contradiction. Is it a fast day or is it a day of happiness? The Gemara says, Karlu Tzayim. The pasuk says that these days are days of fasting. For Karlu Sasa and Simcha, and the pasuk also calls them at the end. These are days of happiness. So the Gemara explains, Bisman Shi'ei Shalom, at the time when there is peace, Yilu Sasa and Simcha. These days are days of happiness. So let's just assume now, it's Machlokes Rishonim, but we'll assume now that days of peace means in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, when everything was in a way it was supposed to be. So these days, the days of Shavuos Tammuz and the days of Teves are days of happiness. Ain't Shalom, when there's no peace, so and then we commemorate these days of fast. So the Gemara is asking a question now. So why didn't the Shluchim, after the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash, the messengers should have also went out in Tammuz and Teves, so everyone should know when the appropriate dates are. Shouldn't be guessing when the dates are. People live far away from the Beis Hamikdash. They should know when the appropriate day is to fast. Answers the Gemara, Amar Rav Papa. Says Rav Papa, Hachi Ka'amar. This is what we mean to say. Bisman Shi'ei Shalom, when there's peace. So again, we'll simply translate it as when the Beis Hamikdash is in its full glory. Yilu Sasa and Simcha. These days are days of happiness, of celebration. Yesh Gezeres HaMalchus, when the Goyim are oppressing us, meaning when we're not under our own dominion, we have the ruling of the Goyim upon us, then Saim, then it's a day of fasting. Ein Gezeres HaMalchus, ve'ein Shalom, when it's a little bit, it's not, the Goyim are really oppressing us, but it's not really in full force Shalom, then Ratzu Misan and Ratzu Ein Misan. Then it's optional. It's up to every Jew or every community. We'll have to understand exactly what that means to have a fast on these days or not. So Tammuz and Teves, the Gemara at this point is saying, are not 100% set in stone, because even after Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the Gemara seems to be understanding, since at that point we weren't fully under Gezeres HaMalchus, it wasn't a Shas Hashmad, so it wasn't a full-fledged obligation to fast in Tammuz and Teves. The Gemara says, so why they go out on Av? If it's not a full-fledged obligation to fast, why they go out, the Shluchim, why did the messengers of Bezdin go out to tell us when Tisha B'Av is? Asked the Gemara, Yachi Tisha B'Av Nami, why are we commemorating Tisha B'Av? Amar Papa, the Gemara answers, Rav Papa says, Shani Tisha B'Av is different, because there were numerous tragedies that happened in it. To Amar Mar, because we have taught in other places, but Tisha B'Av, the Gemara here just lists 4 things, but we know there's really 5, but here the Gemara says 4 calamities happened on Tisha B'Av. The first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Beitar was wiped out, and the city of Yerushalayim was plowed over. So that's the conclusion of the Gemara for now. So let's recap. The Gemara told us, the Mishnah told us that we go out, the Shluchim, the messengers of Bezdin go out on Av to tell everybody when Tisha B'Av is going to be. But they don't go out on Tammuz and Teves because those days are not as established as fast days, as severe as Tisha B'Av was. Tisha B'Av, it sounds like, is Huchbulu B'Tzaris. There are numerous calamities that happen, so it's a compounded day of tragedy, so we fast, no matter what. And the Tammuz and Teves are more up for grabs, so to speak, that depending on what else is going on in our general well-being as a nation, whether or not we have it as a full-fledged fast day or not, just that no one should be confused at this point. Lahalacha, we paskin nowadays, we have a full-fledged fast day on Shavuos Tammuz and Asar B'Teves, as we're unfortunately well aware of. There's a difference in the severity of the fast between those and the fast of Tisha B'Av. As we know, Tisha B'Av is more severe, but it's not optional nowadays, Shavuos Tammuz and Asar B'Teves. So now let's discuss what exactly, again, what this Mishnah was talking about. It's a little bit ambiguous in the exact language of the Mishnah. Are we talking about in the times of the Beis Hamikdash? Do they commemorate Tisha B'Av? Obviously, they had the calendar date of Tisha B'Av. What happened on Tisha B'Av during the days of the second Beis Hamikdash? they know that the first Beis HaMikdash got destroyed on that day, so it's a sad day in history. But now they're in the middle of they have the second Beis HaMikdash. We were living in Eretz Yisrael with the second Beis HaMikdash. I wasn't in the same glory as the first Beis HaMikdash, but we're living in a much better time than living in Galus. So what did they do during that time? The Mishnah seems to imply that they went out on Av, and it sounds like the simple reading of the Mishnah is that they did fast on Tisha B'Av in the second Beis HaMikdash, even though they were in the middle of living in the time of the second Beis HaMikdash. However, when the Gemara concluded that Tisha B'Av was a compounded day, many of those things, 3 of those things, were only at the time of the second Beis HaMikdash. The second Beis HaMikdash being destroyed, obviously, is at the end of the second Beis HaMikdash. The city of Beitar is also, that's talking about the second Beis HaMikdash, and the fact that Yerushalayim was plowed over, that's also at the end of the second Beis HaMikdash. So, although it's a compounded day of Tzaras, like the Gemara concludes, but it's funny because those are all the second Beis HaMikdash. So that seems to imply that the only tragedy that we had before the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, at least according to this Gemara, was the idea that the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Now we know from other sources in Chazal, the Gemara in Tainis tells us that was the day at the Meraglim as well, gave their bad report, and we were decreed that we weren't going to go into Eretz Yisrael. By the way, that's true, but it seems like 3 out of the 5 heavy tragedies of Tisha B'Av are only post or with the destruction and post the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. So what exactly did they commemorate during the second Beis HaMikdash? Okay, so let's see the Ritva from the Rishonim in Masechta Rosh Hashanah, source number 2. The Ritva comments when the Gemara asked the question that the Shluchim should go out during Tammuz and Teves, so he says, Pirish, because these are days of fast days also, Gam Kain la'achar ha'chorben, after the destruction. The Masnisa Nami la'achar ha'chorben, he says the Ritva, the Mishnah is only talking about after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. Midiktani al ha'av and pnei ha'tainis, because the Mishnah said they go out on Av because of the fast day. Umidiktani, and the Mishnah concludes, and I look at this careful reading of the Ritva, Ukishahaya Beis HaMikdash kayim yoitzin al iyar. He says they go out on Iyar. Our Mishnah said they go out also on Iyar. One extra word. Also, af. Also. And the Ritva's gears on the Mishnah is they go out, they switch. During the time of the Beis HaMikdash was still standing, they go out on Iyar, so it was 6 months a year, because Iyar, and not Av. And when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, they flipped Iyar for Av. They would not go out on Iyar anymore, they would go out for Av. So now we have the Ritva is clearly learning that during the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, there was no reason for the Shluchim to go out on Av per se, because there was no fast day. There's no destruction of Beis HaMikdash. We had the first Beis HaMikdash destroyed, that's true, but since the time of the second Beis HaMikdash is the time it was rebuilt, and we're celebrating the Beis HaMikdash and living with the Beis HaMikdash. So according to Ritva, there will be no fast of Tisha B'Av during that time period, and therefore no reason for the Shluchim to go out. So the Shluchim only went out on Iyar. So according to Ritva, it's always 6 times a year the Shluchim go out. It's a question of Av or Iyar. Again, according to our simple reading of the Mishnah with our Girsa, it would seem not like the Ritva, because our Mishnah says they also go out on Iyar. Also implies that the first 6 stand, meaning they go out also, the Shluchim, the messengers of Bezdin go out during Av, and they also go out on the 7th month, the month of Iyar. However, the Rambam in source number 3 in Pirush Mishnayos, he learns a long paragraph. We'll just focus over there on the end where it's underlined. He learns very clearly that during the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, it says V'hayamis in Tisha B'Av Af al Pishu Maser l'Ritzon. Even though it's dependent on their will, the Rambam learns that whole Gemara where it's discussing that the fast days are dependent on the circumstances of Klal Yisrael, what they're holding by, meaning if they're holding on to the oppression of the Goyim or not. But nonetheless, the Rambam learns that they always fasted on Tisha B'Av, even in the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, because there are numerous tragedies that happen. So Rambam learns there are numerous tragedies that happen. Now again, even though according to what we said before, historically, maybe only 2 tragedies happened during the times of the second Beis HaMikdash already. The fact that the Meraglim came back on the 9th of Av, and the fact that the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. The next 3 tragedies, which the Gemara tells us happened, didn't happen yet during the times of Beis HaMikdash. But nonetheless, since already was a compounded day of tragedy, the fact that the Meraglim came back, and the fact that the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, so Rambam learns clearly that they did fast during the time of the second Beis HaMikdash. So right now we have a historical machlokes, and again we'll get to the ramifications of this as we go along, but right now it's a historical machlokes Rishonim. During the times of the second Beis HaMikdash, did they fast on Tisha B'Av or not? According to the Ritva, they did not fast on Tisha B'Av, and according to the Rambam and Pirush Mishnayos, they did fast on Tisha B'Av. Now it's interesting to note, we spoke about this once before, but it's just to point out, I don't know if the Rambam is alluding to this or not, I think it'll be a stretch to say he is. According to some Mefarshim, the original fight of Yaakov with the Sar Shel Esav, with Esav's Malach, where the Esav's Malach hit him in the thigh, and that's why we don't need to get an Asha. According to the Chassam Sofer, that happened on Tisha B'Av also. So if you go with that, so that was the original fight of the Goyim against the Yidden. It happened on Tisha B'Av, and that's where we got damaged, so to speak, by the Goyim the first time. So that would also be an idea that Tisha B'Av was already, even before the Meraglim, was a time of a tragedy. Okay, so now let's move on to source number 4, the Tashbeit, who was a late Rishon. He was a Rav in Algeria, North Africa, in the late 1300s, early 1400s. So he has a tshuva there discussing the halachas of the fast days. In the last paragraph of the tshuva there, he discusses this opinion of the Rambam, where the Rambam again says that they would, yes, fast on Tisha B'Av during the times of the second Beis HaMikdash. And just to sum up what he says, he's very upset that the Rambam even suggests this. He says it doesn't really fit in with the whole understanding of the second Beis HaMikdash. Seemingly we celebrated then, we lived then in a time of peace, so we should not be fasting on Tisha B'Av. And therefore he concludes the last couple lines there in source number 4. He says, V'nira, he says, Shemashakasav Harav, that which the Rambam writes, that we fasted on Tisha B'Av, who toy sofer, it's a mistake. The people, the Rambam students who wrote over his explanation on the Pirush HaMishnayos made a mistake. If you look through the Gemara, you'll see I'm right. I don't have to explain anymore. I don't think it's correct. It must be a mistake. It's impossible. Okay? So now we have what we had. We thought we had a Machlokes Rishonim. Says the Tashbeitz that I don't believe the Rambam ever said it. Even though it's printed, it's a mistake. And no such opinion exists.
What's his reason?
He goes through, I didn't read the whole middle, but he has a question from the Gemara that it seems like to imply that Tisha B'Av was not the same. Tisha B'Av was like the other fast day, that when there's time of Shalom and there's time of peace, we wouldn't have Tisha B'Av being commemorated as a fast, just like we didn't have Shavas B'Tamas and Asar B'Teves, because although, like we know, many tragedies happened ultimately on Tisha B'Av, by that time not that many happened yet, so it wouldn't be any more severe at that point, more than Shavas B'Tamas or Asar B'Teves, or the 9th of Tammuz actually fasted in those days. But nonetheless, he says that it can't be that during times of Beis HaMikdash, when they were living with the Beis HaMikdash, they were still fasting and mourning over the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash.
I mean, as you mentioned before, the second Beis HaMikdash, most of the Israel were not back. You didn't have
there was
Aaron, you didn't have so many of
there was a lot missing in the second Beis HaMikdash. That's true, but the Tashbeit has a hard time digesting that would be enough reason to commemorate a communal fast, arguing on the Rambam. But okay, we have the Rambam, we have multiple prints of the Rambam that all have it in the Rambam, and then we'll see as we go along that many of the other Mefarshim don't accept the Tashbeit's rejection of the Rambam. But we have the Tashbeitz who rejected this idea that the Rambam ever said that we would fast during the times of the second Beis HaMikdash. The Turi Even, from the Achronim, in source number 5, he says that which the Mishnah says that we would go out on the Shluchim of Bezdin would go out on the month of Av to tell everybody that the fast is coming. He says it's talking about Bisman Hazeh Ayri. It's mostly talking about post Churban. That's when the Shluchim would go out. Aval Ein Lefarish, but says Turi Even, don't tell me that they go out. Mnei Tainus is Milsa Psikta Ka'amar Bisman Hazeh Kadesh Yisanu Bisman Abayis Kadesh Lo Yisanu. Maybe you'll tell me, he says, that they would send Shluchim out during the times of the Beis HaMikdash to know when Tisha B'Av is, so that they shouldn't fast and they should have some day of celebration. Because like we said, that these sad days in the times of when there's no oppression and there's times of Shalom, so these were days of Sasan and Simcha. So there was a quasi type of Yontifs. So maybe you would say that although fine, we're not fasting during the times of the second Beis HaMikdash, but nonetheless, they should go out on for Av as well, in order that we should know when Tisha B'Av is, in order that we should not say Tachanun. Everyone wants to know when you don't say Tachanun, and that we should maybe have a little tikkun in shul after davening, some herring and kichel, some type of sasan and simcha. He says don't say that, because he concludes the imkain, because if so, lifku nam is manabayis atamas v'teves. Then they should have went out in the times of the second Beis HaMikdash during the month of Tammuz and during the month of Teves as well, because those fast days also were sasan and simcha, also days of happiness and joy in the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, and we don't find such a precedent. Therefore, he learns in the Mishnah as well, like the Ritva, that the Mishnah is talking about Av and Bnei Tainus is only post Churban, post second destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. But during the times of the second Beis HaMikdash itself, they would not go out during Av, even though there was some reason for them to go out, because we should know when the days are, so we should have a celebration on those days. Nonetheless, says that's not a reason to go out, and maybe we'll discuss why in a moment. But again, he learns the Mishnah like the Ritva, that during the times of the second Beis HaMikdash, there was no commemoration in a sad way of Tisha B'Av. However, on the bottom of the Turi Even, right over there in the smaller print, that's the Hagais, the notes of the Baruch Tam or Baruch Frankel, and there he takes issue with the Turi Even because he says you're ignoring the Rambam. The Rambam in Pirush HaMishnayos, and we'll soon see the Rambam in Yad HaChazaka and Mishnah Torah as well, seems to imply this as well, that during the times of the second Beis HaMikdash, they did commemorate, they did have a fast day on Tisha B'Av. And therefore he concludes, although maybe you'll say that they had some type of fasting of Tisha B'Av during the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, according to the Rambam, but he says it might not have been the full severity, the full blow of Tisha B'Av like we have it today, with all a myriad of details, more chomer than other fasts, but he wants to, entertain the possibility, so to speak, that with the Rambam, this idea that they did have Tisha B'Av during the time of the second Beis HaMikdash as well. Let's just take this one step further until we bring it a little closer to us. So the Rambam in the next page in Yad HaChazaka in source number 6, there the Rambam in Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh, where he discusses all the halachos of when how the Bezdin sanctified the new moon and when the shluchim will go out, etc. He brings the Mishnah in a little bit of a longer version, and he concludes at the end of source 6 where it's underlined, "Ubizman shebeis hamikdash kayam," when the Beis Hamikdash was still existent, "Yoitzin af al iyar bnei pesach katan." So before, I didn't read it inside with you again, but he says they also go out on av bnei tanis, like the Mishnah says. And the end, he concludes just like the way we have the Mishnah written, that they will go out also during iyar because of Pesach Sheni. So the way the Rambam reads over here as well is that you would go out, the shluchim would go out during av because of the tainus, and they would go out as well during the times of Beis Hamikdash on iyar. So it would be 7 months in total in the times of Beis Hamikdash. So again, this seems to apply for the way the Rambam's paskening that we would, yes, have fasted on Tisha B'Av during the times of the second Beis Hamikdash. In the Sefer Shekel HaKodesh, which is Reb Chaim Kanievsky's Shlita notes on the Rambam in Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh, it's written like a style of a Mishnah Berurah. So let's read this together. He says as follows, where it's source number 7. Af al iyar, in the second line there, it says mashma da al kol hani gam ken yoitzin. On all these months they went out. Af al av, even on the month of Av, the bnei tainus de rabbeinu l'shitasa, because the Rambam goes according to his opinion. Shekasa Pirush HaMishnah, Rambam writes in his explanation of the Mishnayos, the gam bizman ba'isheni hisanu b'Tisha B'Av. So the Chaim Kanievsky explains the way you read this Rambam simply goes in sync with the way the Rambam Pirush HaMishnayos writes that we did fast during the times of the second Beis Hamikdash on Tisha B'Av. Avol, now here's the big avol. However, das shar Rishonim, the opinion of all the other Rishonim, so there's a Rambam on one side of the equation, and everybody else, you look in the footnote there, he brings a whole slew of Rishonim who's on this side. It's the Ritva, it's Taisvis, it's the Tashbeitz, like we said, and many other Rishonim. So he writes, Das shar Rishonim, the Bizman Ba'yisheni, Haya Tisha B'Av Yantif. Tisha B'Av was a day of joyous, happiness. Umikomakay. By perhaps, even though it was a day of joy, there would maybe the shluchim would go out as well. Lo haidiyashu yantif, to let everybody know when Rosh Chodesh Av is, so we should know that today is a yantif on Tisha B'Av. Aval al Tammuz v'Tevis lo yatzu, but on Tammuz and Tevis they did not go out, even though they would go out on Av. Even though they were yantif as well, because those are not as severe. Now again, so let's recap. So Chaim Kanievsky Shlita explains that the Rambam, the simple way to read the Rambam over here in Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh is in sync with the Rambam Pirush HaMishnayos. Rambam L'Shitasa, it makes it much easier. The Rambam goes according to his own opinion that even in the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, they would fast on Tisha B'Av, and therefore the shluchim of Bezdin, the messengers of Bezdin, would go out to tell everybody when Rosh Chodesh Av is, and therefore they can fast on Tisha B'Av. However, according to the other Rishonim, who all argue in the Rambam and say that there was no commemoration of a sad way of Tisha B'Av during the second Beis Hamikdash, in fact, quite to the opposite, to the contrary, they commemorate Tisha B'Av as a happy day, as some type of yontif. There he says maybe they went out as well, not to tell us to fast, but to tell us the opposite, that what day Rosh Chodesh was, 9 days later, will be Tisha B'Av. You don't say Tachanun, and you can have a little feast, and drink a l'chaim, etc. So he asked on himself, why didn't they go out on Tammuz and Teves? We should commemorate those as days of happiness as well during the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, because he says those are not so chomer, they're not so severe. Now what does that mean? Now it's true, the way we have the halacha today, like I mentioned before, we're all familiar that Tisha B'Av is more severe in the fasting of it, that we know that the fast starts at night, there are much more restrictions, we're much more strict, that we don't break the fast as easily. For someone who's not feeling so well, obviously in certain cases, of course we will, but we're slower to pull the trigger, so to speak, to be lenient for someone not to fast on Tisha B'Av. But what does it mean that in the times of the second Beis HaMikdash, or in general, that the fasts of Shavas B'Tammuz and Asar B'Teves are less severe? So here's the Chiddush from Minchas Chinuch, in source number 8, and I think...
He's not making the same deal that you made in the Ritva.
It fits in very well. The Ritva didn't have the word af, so it fits in very well according to the Ritva. He's trying to say, even if you have the word af, you can still, could be the other, I didn't look through all the Rishonim, it could be the other Rishonim had the word af and still learn like this. So he's trying to, balance it out.
But the Torah Evan said not to do that. Not to.
Right, he
said
like, don't pick up the word af. Right. But if you do, according to the Rambam, it fits very well. Right. And according to Ritva, who didn't have it, it really, it makes it much, much easier if you have it or didn't have it. The other Rishonim seemingly had it and still learned like the Ritva. That's why we want to try to, balance them out.
When they celebrated on Tisha B'Av, what were they celebrating?
Why was it a day of Sasan and Simcha? Because I guess the way I understand it, that at one point this was a day of sadness because the first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. But now that we're living in a time of the second Beis Hamikdash, we have the Karbanos, we have the Avodah back, we have an opportunity to go serve Hashem. So it's not a day of sadness anymore.
But make it a day of happiness and joy.
But that's what they say. The time when Mashiach comes, Tisha B'Av is going to be a Yom Tov.
Right. Well, that could be even for a deeper reason, for the next step, because that could be because we'll understand how everything developed. Even though what we thought was sad, he's asking, even in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, it's still a sad thing still happened, and like you're saying, it's still missing. Okay. I don't know. I'm not sure. I didn't see anyone speak this out exactly. When we say it was a day of Yom Tif, I don't think it means a day of Yom Tif like we celebrate Pesach, so to speak, where it's Asar b'Malacha. I'm thinking the way I'm understanding Yom Tif, I'm not sure if I'm correct, but the way I'm understanding it is that it was a day, like I said, that they would have some type of quasi Yom Tif status. Something similar where they wouldn't say Tachanan, so to speak. You can have an extra Suda, but it wouldn't be a day that was necessarily Asar b'Malacha. There was no Kedushas Hayayim like a day of Pesach or Sukkot or Shavuos, things like that, where it's a full-fledged Yom Tif. But let's see the Minchas Chinuch. Okay. The Minchas Chinuch says a big Chiddush. And I'm not going to be able to go through everything. This is already a cutout from a much bigger piece, and even this is pretty big over here. But the basic idea is as follows. The Minchas Chinuch suggests, he's going to suggest about all four Tanaisim, but I'm going to limit his Chiddush a little bit to say a different word. The Minchas Chinuch says an idea that is interesting. He points out that the pasuk in Zechariah that the Gemara quoted, we said before in the beginning, from Gemara Rosh Hashanah, didn't call the fasts by their calendar date exactly. It didn't say the 10th of Teves, the 7th day of Tammuz, the 3rd day of Tishrei, and the 9th of Av. It called them by the months. The fast that's in the 4th month, the fast that's in the 5th month, the fast that's in the 7th month, and the fast that's in the 10th month. What happened to the dates?
They
the months are important.
The name of the month.
They didn't say the name of the month. That's true because the name of the month also only came about later. But it doesn't even say what I'm pointing out. Particularly, Mechzinach is saying what happened to the dates. It's good to know the month. The month is very general, so now you narrowed it down to 29 or 30 days. But it's still kind of open ended. What day is it? The Mechzinach goes on and says a chiddush that although we have a specific date when we commemorate in Teves, the 10th day of Teves, we have a date in Tammuz, the 7th day of Tammuz, etc. When we commemorate, really the date is not so important. The month is the important part, meaning that this month has tragedy that happened in it, and we have to choose a date where we're going to commemorate all the tragedy. If you think about it for a minute, when we have, for example, Asar B'Teves, the Paiskim, the Svarim speak out, it's brought down that really Ches, Tes, and Yud, 3 days in a row where days of tragedy happen, and then we talk about it in the Slichas of Asar B'Teves, but we're not going to fast, we're not going to impose on the Tzibor 3 days in a row of fasting, so we choose Asar B'Teves as to commemorate all those fasts. Shivas B'Tammuz, the same idea. The 9th day of Tammuz was also a day of tragedy. Other days in Tammuz we speak about were days of tragedy. So Chazal picked one day, 7th day of Tammuz, to compound together to have this as a day of commemoration for the whole month of Tammuz. So the Minchas Chinuch suggests that there's no, so to speak, I'll use the term, but it doesn't say this exactly, Kedushas Hayom, there's no specific date for each one of the Tanaisim. It's the month in general that we need to know that this is the month we're in now, in this month the day happened. Now again, La Halacha, we're not going to take this to the extreme and say, well, if I fast, I choose a date, I choose the 4th day of Tammuz to fast because it's more convenient for me. It doesn't work. You have to fast the 10th day of Tammuz. But in the way, in London, the way he explains how it was developed as the month, and then till Chazal narrowed it down to a day. Therefore, he suggests that it's not so important necessarily to know for Tammuz and Teves when exactly the date is. Because as long as you know that we're now in the month of Tammuz, you know in the month of Teves, whichever day, whether it's a fast or a happy day, depending on what time period we're living in, as long as you commemorate a day in that month, either for a fasting or for a day of Simcha, he suggests then you're fulfilled what Chazal wanted us to do. Again, like I said, nowadays la halacha, we narrowed it down to a specific date, and that date is usually immutable. We don't change it. But in the way it was originally organized, the way it originally developed, it's interesting how Chazal originally developed it. He said it wasn't specific. So that's why we can suggest, that's why it wasn't important for the shluchim necessarily to go out on the day, the month of Tammuz and Teves, even though those months had fast days in it, because the date in the month wasn't specific. It wasn't date specific, it was month specific. So we know what month we're going to be in. The question of what day is Rosh Chodesh, is that day, is it that day? It's not so, that's a technical detail. It's not ultimately very, very important, because as long as we have one date in that month either to fast, or we have one day in that month to commemorate as the day of Sasa and the Simcha, like the Pasuk says in Zechariah, then we would have fulfilled the idea of the pasuk of having a day either of Tzayim or a day of Sasa and Simcha. However, perhaps you can say by Tisha B'Av wouldn't be the same. Although the Mechasech doesn't speak out this distinction, I think it could be a strong distinction, because Tisha B'Av, like we said, Hochbulu by Tzaros, there was a day. It was never really other tragedies that we are commemorating in Tisha B'Av more than Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is always the national day, so to speak, of Jewish tragedy. So that's why even maybe during the times when they, according to those Rishonim, that they commemorated Tisha B'Av as a day of Sasan and Simcha, they had to go out on Av because they had to know specifically the date. Again, we're drawing a distinction between Tammuz and Teves versus Av. Tammuz and Teves they never sent out because the date wasn't specific, as opposed to Tisha B'Av, the Rosh Chodesh Av, they had to send out. It was date specific, because even the times when it was Sasan and Simcha were suggesting perhaps that was date specific. Okay. Right, Mechassid does make the distinction between Tisha B'Av. If you look at the rayas of the Minchas Chinuch, his main raya in the middle is from a Gemara, and that Gemara does not apply to Tisha B'Av. So that's why I think there's room to say what I'm saying in Mechassid, but yes, the Minchas Chinuch is not saying exactly what I'm saying. Okay, now we have all this discussion, like we said before, it's a lot of nice history, but let's take it now Lamaisa. What does it have to do with us? Bottom line, Lamaisa, why do we care in Tafshin Ayin Ches, besides the fact that it's Torah, L'Hagu Torah L'Adira, but will it have any halachic nafkamina, the fact if or not they fasted on Tisha B'Av during the second bias. So here we go. This is the Chiddush of the day. Says the Ramah in source number 9 in Hilchos Tisha B'Av. The Ramah says in a year where Tisha B'Av falls out during the week, not like this year, so we know that we have a Suda Mafsekes, the Suda right before the fast. That's a very small meal. We have eggs, and then in the Minhagis we have like a bread dipped in ashes and eggs, a very small meal. But earlier in the day, the Ramah says it's appropriate to have a nice sized meal, not like, no, we can't have fleishiks at that time. That's what we paskin, but we should have something good so we can make it through the fast. Right? If we don't eat up properly before the fast, we're not giving ourselves a fighting chance to make it through the fast day. So the Ramah says as follows. This is important. It says Haggah. Uminig b'chol galilos Ashkenaz. The minig is in all the outlying Ashkenazi regions. Lechol suda kavua kaida mincha, to eat a meal before mincha. V'acha kach mispal mincha. Then we daven mincha. V'oichel suda mafsekes. So the Ramah is telling us how to have the menu for the day. Let's just say, for argument's sake, mincha will be at 6 o'clock. So before 6 o'clock mincha, have a nice large dinner, have a big meal to get ready for the fast. Go daven mincha, come home, and have the smaller meal, suda mafsekes, and then get ready for the fast. Then the Ramah says, the minig is to have a larger meal, the first meal, in order that the fast should not be harmful to them. Like we just said, it's practical, so we should be able to get through the fast, load up on the calories and the carbs and the protein, everything before the fast. Because we also start a little bit early, like we start the fast right by Shkia time, like we do in Yom Kippur, as opposed to other fasts we start the next morning. And then it continues, he has a raya for Medrash Eicha. So again, so Ramah says he's codifying for us a halacha, just like on Erev Yom Kippur, we have to have there, it's a real mitzvah to eat, but he's saying in a similar vein, there's an idea of having a big meal late in the afternoon before the Suda Mafsekas on a regular Erev Tisha B'Av, again, not this year. Comes along the Magen Avram on the Shulchan Aruch over there in source 10 and says a Chiddush. Where does the Ramah get this from? The Ramah is very practical, like we just said. Make sure you load up on the food, you'll be able to make it through the tinus. Says the Magen Avram, it's much deeper than that. Shlo yazik lahem, v'li nira, says the Magen Avram, this is in source number 10, the Magen Avram Ayis Yud Aleph, v'li nira tam, I'll tell you a new reason. Achar, another reason, because in the times of the second base of Mikdash, Hayayamtiv Tisha B'Av was a Yamtiv, and they increased, they had a lot of food on that day of Tisha B'Av. So therefore, Achshav, there too, also now, Loizazu Mimena, we should not leave from that idea, and obviously we can't eat on Tisha B'Av. Liyais Lizikarin, there should be a remembrance, Sheyahapech B'Meher B'Yamein L'Sasan L'Simcha. Says the Magen Avraham, the reason why we have a big meal on Erev Tisha B'Av is to remember that at times the second base of Mikdash, Tisha B'Av is a Yantif. What's the Magen Avraham telling us? Not like the Rambam. Magen Avraham is telling us like Roiv Rishonim that during the times of the second base of Mikdash is we had a big meal on Tisha B'Av. We had a Fleishik is Suda on Tisha B'Av. So therefore on Erev Tisha B'Av we can't have Fleishiks nowadays, but have some type of big Suda and say, think in your mind, in the times of the base of Mikdash I was able to take the Suda tomorrow on Tisha B'Av, and Meher B'Yamein Mashiach Shekam Spili in our days will have a big Suda on Tisha B'Av itself as well. And then it concludes very small words over there. He says, Ayin Beis Yosef. Look at the Beis Yosef in Soif Siman Tov Kof Nun Daled, because you'll see there's a source for what I'm telling you. Again, but what's the Magen Avraham telling us right now? He's telling us an idea that since in the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, Tisha B'Av is celebrated as, like I said, a quasi yontif. Therefore, we should have a big meal on Erev Tisha B'Av as well, in order to remember what it was in times of Beis Hamikdash and be anticipatory for the coming of Mashiach Spili in our days. So, what does the Beis Yosef say over there in Tov Kof Nun Dal? So I quote over here on the bottom. This is the Pirush of the Machzas HaShekel. Machzas HaShekel is like a super commentary on the Magen Avraham. He just references everything and explains the depth of the Magen Avraham. So right over here in that paragraph underneath the Magen Avraham, he says an amazing thing. Beis Yosef there Paskins, he brings an opinion of the Kolba. If you look, it's like a second line down there. He says, Lahachzik levaves chalusha is to strengthen the hearts of the weak ones. The Beis Yosef brings the name of the Kolbai, Jisakanim Harishayim, the elder rabbis. Henhigu, they allowed the following custom. Shahanashim roichtzais roishon min amincha l'maya. They allowed women on Tisha B'Av afternoon to wash their hair, to wash their head, B'Tisha B'Av. Why? Lefisha hanashim chalushas. Women have according to this, they're more weaker in their nature. Lahamin ben achamais, to believe fully in the fact that Mashiach is coming. Meishein yoidais sefer, they're not as well versed as the men. The men spent the whole day in shul saying kinnis, listening to drushes, watching videos, whatever we're doing the whole Tisha B'Av, being mechazik. Women don't have the same opportunity. They're at home. They're not the same option. So they're not as necessarily mechuzik for the coming of Mashiach. And we have to do something that will give the women a little boost to be exciting and waiting for Mashiach. For us who smach, and we do this custom based on the idea that the Medrash tells us Ki Mashiach noila b'yom Tisha B'Av, Mashiach is going to be born on Tisha B'Av. But again, the Beis Yosef says that we shouldn't do this minig, we shouldn't allow the women to do it. And he says, but that's the idea that the Magen Avraham is coming from, that we do a minig on Erev Tisha B'Av to get people excited. Tisha B'Av is a very sad day. We don't want everyone to be depressed, chas v'shalom. We have to commemorate, of course, and mourn the destruction of Beis Hamikdash. But we want to keep it also with a certain positive twist. We want to have a bigger meal on Erev Tisha B'Av in order that people should be excited that this is what it used to be in the times of Beis Hamikdash, a nice meal, and Meher B'Yamein, Mashiach will come, we'll have a big meal again on Tisha B'Av. Again, so that's the idea the Magen Avraham says, and we learn out from how, according to the Magen Avraham, they did, yes, celebrate Tisha B'Av, or so to speak, commemorate Tisha B'Av in a happy way during the second bias. That's why we have a big meal on Erev Tisha B'Av. So I want to add, based on Magen Avraham, it fits in very well. This year that's coming, if unfortunately Mashiach doesn't come before the end of the week, so we know Tisha B'Av, the date of Tisha B'Av falls out when? Falls out on Shabbos itself. So on Shabbos itself, although it's Tisha B'Av, we have a certain halachas of Erev Tisha B'Av on it. But nonetheless, the Shulchan Aruch tells us, even though it's Erev Tisha B'Av, we're not allowed to do things that we might do during the year. There's no Suda Mafsekes this year on Shabbos. And more than that, the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch is that we should eat meat on Shabbos. V'shoisek ki yain, we should drink wine. Ki Suda Mafsekes, instead of having the regular Suda Mafsekes, Shabbat Shal Shudas this week, you don't have to eat fleishiks, but you're allowed to eat fleishiks. Umala al Shulchana, you should have your table set. Afilu Kesuda Shloima, Be'ez Machus, like Shlomo Melech had it, you should have a royal table set for Shabbos this week. Why? Because we can't show Avelis. But I think it's more than that. According to what Magen Avraham just said, it's very geschmack. This year we have a unique opportunity, anytime Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, that we can remember, usually we can't eat on Tisha B'Av, right? But at times in the second Beis Hamikdash, according to the Magen Avraham, they ate on Tisha B'Av. And therefore the Magen Avraham says what? To have a big meal on Erev Tisha B'Av. this year we can actually have a big meal on Tisha B'Av and fulfill this idea as well, because again, this year Tisha B'Av is on Shabbos technically, so in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, the date of Tisha B'Av was a day of a quasi-yontif that had a big meal, so it fits in very well, Lashon l'Shulchan Aruch, that on Shabbos we have to make sure to have Kisura Shlomo HaMelech. Why are you setting a royal feast for? Because it's the idea of a yontif Suda, the Mishnah speaks about. We shouldn't go overboard, we shouldn't make a big party in the Shabbos. There's a whole question if someone wants to make a Kiddush in Shabbos, is he allowed to, not allowed to? Okay, so we're not going to make a big party for the whole community. But the idea of to have on our own table an appropriate feast, and to remember it should be anticipatory that now, unfortunately, it's Erev Tisha B'Av. Hopefully it won't be, but case is, the idea is that, and we have to eat up before the fast. But Bisman HaBayis, the meal I would eat now would be the meal I would eat Mamash on Tisha B'Av. I would have a cholent, and I would have a big steak dinner, whatever it would be on Tisha B'Av itself. So that's a new twist on this idea that we can have a big meal on Shabbos, and the mindset that it's to remember what it was in times like a Beis HaMikdash, and what should be B'meher B'yameinu. I want to take now the last few minutes to discuss another halacha which is applicable this year, particularly for Erev Shabbos. The Ramah says in source 11 that the minhag is on every Erev Tisha B'Av that after Chatzais on Erev Tisha B'Av, let's say Tisha B'Av fall in the middle of the week, so on Erev Tisha B'Av after Chatzais, we do not learn regular things of Torah, we only learn things which are applicable for Tisha B'Av, sad things, Hilchos Avelos, Hilchos Tisha B'Av, Eicha, the Nevi'im, which discuss the Churban HaBayis. And the Ramah goes so far and says, even this year, when Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, and we're not going to commemorate, and Tisha B'Av is really commemorated on Sunday, but he says it's appropriate that Shabbos afternoon as well, the Ramah says we should not learn our regular Torah studies, we should only learn things which are applicable for Tisha B'Av, and the Ramah says, even those people who usually learn Pirkei Avos should not learn Pirkei Avos this Shabbos afternoon because it's Erev Tisha B'Av. However, the Mishnah Berurah and many other Achronim, according to the Be'er Halacha, goes to town this halacha, and he says that although the Ramah is coming from a source, it's not unsourced, but it's comes out a big hefset, a big loss for people who are makbid in this halacha. Because what happens? People say, "Oh, this Shabbos afternoon, it's Erev Tisha B'Av, I can't learn. I won't go to shul. I won't have my chavrusa. I'll sit home and I'll read the Yated. Or I'll sit home and do something else." That's not an excuse. He says, Chas v'shalom, to be makel and bittul Torah with a religious excuse. He says it's better to sit and learn. The Mishnah Berurah in Radin, in the yeshiva in Radin, they were makel, and the Bachram had regular Seder on Shabbos afternoon on Tisha B'Av, and many other places they have the regular Daf Yomi Shir, because Chas v'shalom, to use this as an excuse not to learn. If a person is able to come and learn Hilchos Avelos or Hilchos Tisha B'Av properly, so fine. But for many people, that's not Mashal Liba Mechafetz, and not so excited about it. They have the regular Chavrusas or the regular Limud, and the Mishnah Berurah over here in Be'er Halacha and other Achronim as well put forth that this is the appropriate practice, that we should make sure to learn properly, not use our religion as an excuse not to learn Torah. As a side, in the next source, there's a cute story from the Beis Halevi in source number 12. The Torah Tamima writes in his diary, the Sefer Makar Baruch, that one day he was in yeshiva in Volozhin. He was there for 2 years straight, because of course who went home those days in yeshiva? And finally, after 2 years, he was on his way back home. He stopped off one night as he was traveling home from Volozhin. He stopped off in a hotel in Minsk. And the hotel was pretty busy that night, and lo and behold, later on in the night, the Beis Halevi himself, the Rav of Brisk, comes in and stays in the hotel, and there weren't enough rooms. The motel was full. So Taretz Mima, the Bachar, he was a Bachar time, he offered the Beis Halevi to come share his room with him. What an opportunity, right? The Gadol Dar. And he knew the Beis Halevi knew his family, so they had some shaykhs. And that night, once the town heard that the Beis Halevi was in the hotel night, of course, people started coming and asking shilas. And there was a maskil from that town, the Taretz Mima writes, who came as well, who was a religious person, but he was a maskil, a little more on the enlightened side, and he had recently opened up a library with many svarim to make it available for the people, but of course the svarim there he had were more tilted towards bring people away from proper Torah observance. And he said the Beis Halevi, he tells the Beis Halevi in front of everybody, he says, I'm very disappointed. I got your sefer, to put in our new library in town. I was expecting such a big gadol, a guy in a bucky like you, the Beis Halevi. You should have had some more kulas in your sefer. Your sefer is full of chumras. So Beis Halevi looks at him, and on the spot he says, Chumras? I have so many kulas. I'll tell you 7 kulas off the bat like that. Some of them are in my sefer, some of them are in the next chelik on my sefer, but I have many more kulas. But I'll just tell you quick, off the bat he tells me 7 kulas. What are the 7 kulas he tells the maskil in front of everybody? He says, first of all, some people are makbid, like the Machaber Paskins, or the Ramah Paskins, that you can't daven Ma'ariv after Chatzos at night. I'm Mekel. You can daven Ma'ariv even after Chatzos. He says some people are machmir, like there are Shulchan Aruch paskins. You cannot put on tefillin the Rabbeinu Tam only if you're a big tzaddik and a big chassid. No, I'm Mekel. Anybody allowed to put on tefillin the Rabbeinu Tam. He says some people are makbid, they're machmir, they're Shulchan Aruch paskins. You can't say piyutim. You can't say extra things during davening. It's a hefsek in davening. I'm Mekel. You can say piyutim during davening. He says some people are machmir that during by Sfiyas HaOmer, if they miss a night, you can't count anymore with the bracha. I'm Mekel. You can count still with the bracha under certain circumstances. He says some people are machmir on Erev Tisha B'Av on Shabbos. They don't say Pirkei Avos. They don't learn. I'm Mekel. You can learn Torah on Tisha B'Av afternoon, Erev Tisha B'Av afternoon as well. He says some people are machmir. The Shulchan Aruch says and say you're not allowed to fast on Rosh Hashanah. I say you're allowed to fast. I'm Mekel. You're allowed to fast on Rosh Hashanah. He says some people are machmir and say you're not allowed to keep 2 days Yom Kippur. It's a sakana. I'm Mekel. You're allowed to keep 2 days Yom Kippur if you want. So right on the spot he responds to the maskil, but the cute story. But the idea was he told him one of the coolest he told him was this idea as well. The Erev Tisha B'Av, it could be Mekel, and the something we should keep in mind. We should never use this as an excuse not to come learn. Just to end off with one point, we unfortunately we're in the 9 days, but we're hoping and looking forward to Mashiach coming, Be'er V'Yameinu. So the question is, when Mashiach comes, what's the Shalom Aleichem? What do we give him? So I just put down here from Chaim Kanievsky Shlita has a list of at least 8 brachas we're going to have to say right away when this Kibbutz Goliath and Mashiach comes, and we should have these brachas. We make a little card, whatever it is. We should be ready that we shouldn't be stumbling to know what to do when Mashiach comes. That was we've got to do tshuva. But besides tshuva, there are 8 brachas at least that he puts down over here. I put in source number 13. Number 1, we're going to have to make a birchas hagoymel because we're going to survive the Milchama, the big war of Gog and Magog. So we survive that war, and we'll probably have to travel to Eretz Yisrael. So that trip itself will obligate us in the fact we survived the war. That's number 1, birchas hagoymel. Number 2, when we see the king, Mashiach is going to be the king. So we have to make a bracha of shechalak mikfoid lebas of Adam because he's the din of a melech. Number 3, since he's also going to be a big Talmid Chacham, wherever it'll be, we have to make the bracha we say and sing the Gadol Hadar, which is shechalak mikfoid l'Ireyav. Number 4 and 5, we're going to have to make a Shechianu and a Mechayim Mesim. When it's Chias HaMesim, we're going to see relatives we haven't seen in a long time. People coming back from their grave. That's 2 brachas there as well. The 6th bracha, we're going to see 600,000 Yidden gathered in one area in Eretz Yisrael, Be'ez Hashem. Or there's a special bracha to make there as well. Baruch Chacham Harazim. There's a 7th bracha, he says, perhaps he suggests we'll have to make. We're going to see some people that are, it says, this is the halacha, that people who have certain disconfigurations of their physically mutated, there are certain brachas we make called Mashana HaBriyos. It says even though Mashiach will heal everybody, that doesn't happen right away. So we'll see something strange, some type of mutation of a human. We'll make an interesting bracha there as well. And then it's also going to have to make a bracha of Baruch Shepetranu, because now we're going to have the Ola Goyim, the oppression of the Goyim will be off from us, and therefore we'll make a bracha that has been removed from us. Then he has other brachas which is Mesupik about. For example, it's Mesupik if we have to make a bracha of Gal Yisrael for the redemption. But there are at least 8 brachas off the bat that we have to be ready to make at any time. So Meher V'Yameinu, we shall be Zeicha this week to make all these brachas.
Amen.